Okay, we are back from a short break. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about finance. Do you want to?
Yeah, this is actually the beginning of your retreat now. So you're gonna hear a lot from staff. You'll hear a lot from the schools, and then also the economic development. This is really an informational session for you guys, question and answers. Not looking for a whole lot of direction tonight, but none of the information you get tonight, or none of the topics tonight, you're not going to be able to solve this in this next hour and a half or 2 hours. Probably every one of these topics are going to demand a parking lot or another meeting. It's just focusing on that particular subject. So ask the questions, listen to the presentations, ask all the questions you want, but just remember, you're not expected to make a whole lot of answers or give a whole lot of answers tonight or direction. However, we will be setting up some parking lot meetings to talk specifically about each of these topics, especially some that are time sensitive. If your direction is to go towards, we'll talk about potential funding mechanisms for schools. If one of those funding mechanisms is a bond, then you've got certain procedures you're going to have to follow, and we'll talk about those. So if that's the process that the majority wants to do, then we'll make that next meeting pretty quickly so that you can meet your timetables on that. But again, this is a retreat. This isn't a regular meeting where you're going to make a lot of motions or anything like that. It's just really getting the information, giving information back, question and answer, sort of a dialogue, so that you have a better understanding of these issues, and then we will set future meetings to make sure that you have more in-depth presentations and discussions on those. So what we have planned now is for our staff to sort of go over the budget in general terms, give you a first quarter update. You can see on your cover sheet there what our agenda was going to look like. For time purposes, I know some of the representatives from the schools have other meetings that they need to go to, so we're going to condense it. If you've got a preference in there where you want to stop our presentation, we can go up to a certain point and then we'll stop and finish at the end, or we'll just stop and leave that information in there for your personal review. So maybe we do a first quarter review, first quarter review, and then we'll stop, and then allow the board, whoever has any comments or input, and then we'll go to the next topic.
Here we go with first quarter. If you look in your book on page 23, we've got a picture of where we stand with some of our revenues. Let's talk about revenues first, then we'll talk about expenses. And this chart represents about 85% of our revenues, so the big stuff's here. And they're categorized by kind of when they come in, because this early in the year, like for instance, sales tax, we only have 2 months of sales tax revenues in to report to you. We do have 3 months of property tax, and some of the things down there under daily recording, like ambulance fees and register of deeds and inspections, those we have a full 3 months. But if you'll notice in total, and I compared it back to fiscal 13 because of how our money's come in. But in fiscal 13, as of September 30th, on a budget of $174 million, we'd brought in $26.7 million. And we're at 15%. This year, on a budget of $189 million, we've brought in $30.4 million and are at 16%. So we're $3,688,000 more dollars have come in, and it's 0.78% ahead of where we were this same time last year. So all in all, that was pretty good. Now, as we look at it in smaller pieces, if you want to look at just property tax, we went from $16.4 million last year to $19.7 this year. So we went from 13% to 14.92. So that's the little arrow on the right. That means, yep, our percentage is higher than it was last year. So that's a good sign. I think that's partially because tax bills went out earlier this year than they did last year. Last year they went out in August. This year they went out in July. So that has helped with our cash flow. The next section is about sales tax. And you'll notice we increased the budget tremendously. If you'll recall, we had more come in last year, which created an excess. So that was budgeted back in the spring when we did our budget. So on a budget of $35.5 million, we've brought in $6.4 million. So we're $327,000 ahead in terms of dollars of where we were last year. But because we upped our budget, instead of being at 20%, we're only at 18.05%. But if you think about that's 2 months, we should be at 16.6 to make our budget, and we're at 18. So I'm going, yeah, we're doing okay. Not worried. The next section talks about the Social Service Administration, and we're a little bit down on that, but no, I don't think it's to worry about. There again, a lot of that does not come in 1/12 because some of the issues we talked about earlier, where sometimes we're doing maintenance of effort and not drawing it down as soon. The Community Alternative Program, that's CAP, that's Medicaid. That one I am watching very closely. We've only got 3.54% of our budget in, and that's because the new state NC track system, we weren't able to bill for quite a while, and then when we did bill, it would deny, and it should have paid, but it wasn't set up correctly to pay. But my understanding is that is improving. I am watching that very carefully, and hopefully the next time I report to you, that will be much improved. The deputy reimbursement, last year they weren't doing it as at the time that we did it on September, they did their billing in October, and we're trying to be more proactive in getting stuff done ahead. So that's one reason we are way ahead this year from where we were last year. Not quite at 25%, but close. On the daily, the ambulance, the inspection, and the register of deeds, all those should be around 25%, and all but ambulance is. And ambulance, what happens is every year it looks like we're going to be below budget, but we get a cost settlement in June. We don't know what that's going to be, but that historically comes in right as we're closing the year and puts us at our budget. So I'm not too worried about that. The program fees, that's from all departments, and if you'll notice, we nearly doubled the budget on that. The big jump in that is that state misdemeanor SMCP with the Sheriff's Department. That's where we're housing state prisoners in our unused beds. And the budget for that is $480,000, and we've only received 2 months. So that's part of why we aren't quite at 25%. And there's other types of revenues in there, like elections, that won't come in until the fall. So I've been taking a look at that, but I think we're in pretty good shape on our revenues. You have any questions before I go to expenses? Okay. You can look at the expenses on, they're on page 25, and an entire sheet of revenues and expenses is on page 35, which you may want to look there. But here the expenses are by function, and if you'll notice, none of them except the debt service interest is over 25%, which means that we are below where we would need to be. The economic and physical development is only at 6%. And that's because we haven't paid any incentives. In order for a company to get incentives, they have to first have paid their taxes, and then we pay some back to them. And so they have, until they pay the taxes, they don't get it. So that's usually in the spring of the year. So that's part of why that's down. We also have had some salary vacancy where the new positions haven't all been filled as of yet. If on page 35, you can see that the total revenues today were $33.2 million, and the expenses were over $40 million. So in terms of cash flow, we're down $5.8 million. But that's one of the reasons we have fund balance. We know that most of our revenues are going to come in the November, December, January timeframe when the taxes are due. And so the first part of the year, in terms of cash, we're going to be spending out, and then the second part of the year we'll catch back up when people pay their taxes. So that's why the negative $5.8 million. And the next sheet has some information about our debt so that you can see, because when I looked at that originally and saw 33, I went, whoa, that's too high. But if you look on the next page where it's got debt service by month, What this gives you is by month, the principal that's due and a cumulative amount, the interest that's due and a cumulative amount. So if you look at the one that's highlighted on September, you can see that at this point where we ought to be, given our debt payments, we should be at 0.11 on the principal, which we are, and 0.33 on the interest, which we are. Basically, for the whole year, we budget $26.8 million in principal and $15.4 million in interest. But I thought this might be helpful for you to see when those big payments were coming. The principal payments usually start kicking in December, and it's pretty stout payments in December, January, February, March, and May is when some of our big principal payments are due.
Okay, so, thanks, Dan. So, just quick, first quarter, where our revenues are tracking pretty closely to 25%. Expenses are tracking as closely as we would like them to be. So we're doing well. The money's coming in, and our expenses are normal. So we can stop at this point. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that? We can come back later and talk more on the 5-year plan after everything, or we can continue on a little further. Either way you prefer.
My only comment was going to be on the vehicle tax. That kicked in September, because I know I had to do that. I had one in August, and I'll pay that tax bill on it when I get it, but September was the beginning of paying it when you renew your tag.
Right, tax and tag together.
We will see a higher amount in these next few months than we normally would see. And next year, that'll go back down to a normal 12-month amount. But
Right.
just to point that out, the vehicle tax will change for next year. It won't, the budget amount will go back down because we know we're going to collect more this year than we normally would. So
Correct.
I just wanted to add that part as a reminder.
And as you know, if you ever need any help or have any questions, I'm always available. Thank you very much.
Any comments from you guys about the budget itself? This is a time. You ready to move on to the school presentations? All right.
Do you want to move on to the school presentation, or do you want me to talk about
Whichever you think's the best time to talk about it. I know they're ready to go. If you want to wait and talk afterwards, or if you wanted to talk prior to them.
Well, my only concern about it is my presentation eliminates the bond. I mean, it basically goes pay as you go completely, and so I would like to talk about that so they have an idea of
Sure.
of what the ideas are, and so I'll just go ahead since you said that I could. Cabarrus County, I think, has the chance right now to change the future. We have borrowed in the past. Our debt service has been our total debt has been up to $423 million, and in just principal, right now our debt and principal together that we owe is $469 million, and it's been floated that we borrow another $100 to $150 million more. I think that we have an opportunity right now, and it might be the only opportunity that we ever have to not borrow that money, to pay as you go, and to really implement a plan for fiscal responsibility that will carry forward and allow Cabarrus County to one day actually pay off its debt. As we just saw in the budget, we pay $42 million a year right now in debt service. That is 20% of our budget. That is a tremendously high number. So I created a plan, and my 3 priorities of this plan were to immediately fund school construction maintenance needs, grow employment opportunities, and to stop the cycle of continuous new debt. The way that I would implement that plan is I would return to a budget of total spending similar to fiscal year 2010 and 2011, a total approximate budget of $200 to $205 million. If you look back at our history, in 2004, our total budget was $130 million. It has gone up 73% in 10 years. I think that's tremendously high, considering that our growth in this county has been 31% over 10 years. So you've really had a much disproportional growth in government compared to compared to population growth. At $205 million, that would give us a budget that was still between 54 and 58% greater than our 2004 budget, even though we've only had 31% growth. Essentially, at $200 to $205 million, that would free up $25 million out of our budget. And what I'd like to do is use $12.5 million to reverse the tax increase of 2012. That tax increase brought our tax rate from 63 cents to 70 cents, so I'd like to reverse that. And I'd like to use the other $12.5 million of that of $25 million to basically just sock away into a school capital needs program, and as you put that money in there, release it so that they could begin building schools immediately. Right now, they're looking at waiting until 2015. The bond would be November 2015, so probably the 2016 fiscal year, and I would like for them to be able to go ahead and start building some schools right away, start working on, we've had a list of things that have come in terms of roofs and things like that need to be done. I'd like to turn them loose with some money and let them go ahead and get started and repairing some of the school damage. And that's the third part of the plan, is immediately use all non-allocated funds to begin school capital improvements and maintenance. And that is approximately $30 to $35 million that we have. If you take that $30 and $35 million and you add what we could produce to that fund, $12.5 million next year, you could potentially have almost $50 million, half of the bond fund, in the next year to go ahead and start building schools. The benefits of my plan are we have no new debt. As I mentioned, we currently have $469 million in principal and interest due. That is after our staff has used really extraordinary efforts to refinance our debt and bring it down about $80 million. If we borrow this $100 to $150 million, we're just wiping out all of the staff's effort. And the result of that $100 to $150 million is that Cabarrus County would owe $500 million. I think that's highly unlikely that if Cabarrus County gets into debt $500 million that we are ever going to pay that off, and it would just create a cycle of continuous borrowing. I think these are reasonable government expenditures at $200 to $205 million. That was our budget just 2 years ago, and still represents a 53% increase, 54% increase over what it was just a decade ago, which I think is a fair number. And I think it would also create jobs. We would incentivize employers to hire more people if we lowered their tax burden. And as of August 2013, we have 85,542 people employed in Cabarrus County. I think we focus a lot of our time and our energy bringing in 5 or 10 or 100 new jobs, but we don't prioritize the companies that are here and actually provide 85,000 jobs. Now, if we really want to grow jobs, then let's make it easier for all of our employers to hire more people and lower the tax rate from 70 cents back to where it was at 63 cents. The wind-shear analysis by itself proved this company was basically saying at 70 cents it could not afford to do this $5 million investment, and at 63 cents it was willing to do it. And that shows how our tax rate has negatively impacted capital improvement and jobs in this county. And so that is my, those are my ideas.
So on page 43 and 48, if you go back in our book where we have the matrix, which I don't know, I know every year we get, and we haven't had a presentation tonight, but every year we've had a presentation on it. You're recommending cutting our operating budget by $25 million, is that right?
I am recommending cutting our total budget from $225 million to between $200 and $205 million, which is where it was.
$25 million. That's
Yes.
what you said was $25 million. So
That's right.
in that sheet, front and back, where are the cuts coming from?
Well, I'm going to sit down and work on it. To be quite honest with you, we had a limited time today, and it's probably not the best use of our time to sit down and brainstorm as to what specific items are intended to be cut. We are going to sit down and work on that. I can give you a couple examples. I mean, for instance, the Board of Commissioners, our budget has grown by probably 50%. our contingency fund is $1.2 million. I think Mr. Downs said that at different times in the past it's been $50,000. I mean, we've got a lot of growth in these areas, and it's not productive to sit down and identify each one, but there are plenty of areas where we could have some real reductions.
I would say that at some point in time, I would say that it is far more productive for us to sit down and talk about where we're going to cut $25 million out of the budget than to just say it without any backing up of that. I mean, that concerns me, that the public may get the perception that we can just nonchalantly cut $25 million out of the budget. Now, if that's true, we've been doing something wrong, and there's no question about that. And I guess that's what your position is. But to say that we can cut if we can cut $25 million out of the budget without impacting services or our citizens, then we've got a far bigger problem than that. And so just to say that without substantiating where that comes from is very concerning to me.
The budget just 2 years ago was exactly where I would like it to be. The budget this year went up by $15 million. We could go back to our budget of just last year and cut $15 million like that. Like that. Just go back to last year's budget, and that's $15 million. Does anybody remember last year thinking that the government was woefully underfunded or underprepared? I don't think that people do. I think that people can think back 2 years and say, our government was functioning just fine at $205 million, and they are certainly capable of functioning just fine at $205 million again. And if it can keep us from owing $500 million, I think people are really interested in at least talking about it and thinking about it.
And I would certainly agree with you that to avoid owing $500 million would be a wonderful thing. I'm not sure, and you say, and you snapped your fingers twice on that $15 million that you could have cut out with anybody noticing, and I'm sure you will be more specific about what that would be. Looking at the numbers that you had presented earlier, comparing 2003 to 2014 as to the ad valorem taxes that had been collected during that time and what the increases were, as well as the debt during that time period. I looked at that very carefully and basically trying to say, okay, what's the point and what are we trying to arrive at here? So one of the ways that and of course this doesn't include budget numbers, this is just taxes collected, and that's and revenue and those increases. So I went back and equated that to our population numbers to come up with a per capita expenditure based on population numbers. I did that beginning in 2004, well actually in 2003, but then looked at the inflation rate that was published for those years and plugged in the inflation rate as to if we had kept our property tax revenue per capita rate constant with the rate of inflation through that time, how do we compare? And I didn't know what the answer to that would be. After going through that process, our actual per capita number compared to the number adjusted for inflation with our population was 3 cents off, which means that if we were, and of course, you can slice and dice the numbers any way you want to all day long and come up with lots of different scenarios, but to me, that would say that if we're in line on the per capita rate throughout that 10-year period, that in order to reduce that number, then we would have to, which I think you're saying reduce the tax rate. And of course, during that same period of time, looking back, the tax rate was 66, and then it was 70, then it was 59, and then it was 56. At some point, I think we had a group of commissioners that wanted to spend down our reserve and not, keep the tax rate lower. And so I think in 2005, they increased the tax rate by 10 cents. It went from 53 cents to 63 cents. The one thing that I don't have on my chart of the revaluation years, which certainly that would impact that. But for us to reduce that per capita rate and provide the same level of services, then that means we would have to figure out a way to beat inflation, to do it less expensively, the same services less expensively. That would be a great thing to do. I don't think we can buy a new car for the same thing today that we could in 2003. We can go down the list and make comparisons, but that's just one way of looking at it. During that same period of time, and I think you had given some percentages. I think from the numbers I have, our population has increased by about 47,000 people during that 10-year period. Our school numbers have increased by over 10,000 during that same period of time. So just to say that the budget has increased during that period of time by that amount would indicate to me that we're just spending more. It doesn't indicate the level of services we're providing. So that is something that I think is pretty important to back those things up when we say to the public that we can. So, I would be interested to know how you can cut $15 million out of the budget just like that, which does not include surpluses, which we have discussed, just as the budget discussion we just had, where property tax revenues came in higher than we expected, and I think adjustments have been made to accommodate that. If we're going to go backwards and cut $15 million out, we have to base it on what we knew at that same time. So I'm sure you have some things in mind.
If you look at our budgets, actually on the second page of the proposal that I gave you, it has our total population, principal-only debt, the tax rate. So the interesting thing about our budgets is in 2013, our budget was $211 million. As we found out in the work session before last, we had a $14 million surplus at the end of 2013. And it's interesting that our budget for 2014 is exactly $14 million more than it was in 2013, which means the surplus that would have been available had you kept the 2013 budget, we just spent. It's included in our budget now. Now we spend $14 million more. And that's what happens every time. And so if you look at the numbers, some of the numbers you talked about, in 2004, total students at our at both of our public school system was about 24,000, and it has gone up by about 10,000. You're right about that. That is a 45% increase. But as I said, our budgets have gone up 73%. Our debt has gone up 135%. Our ad valorem taxes by year have gone up 103%. We are spending more than what inflation would require us to spend. Even your own numbers show that our tax rate is heavy compared to what inflation is. Now, we can disagree on what that is, but we are spending more than what inflation and population growth requires of us, and I think that we could go back to a 2011 budget, fund everything that we need to fund, and not borrow any more money, which would be really a tremendous benefit to all of Cabarrus County, all of our children, and the people coming up forward. If we could eliminate a $45 million expenditure out of our budget in terms of debt service, that would be a tremendous blessing to the people of Cabarrus County. And if there's anything that I can do to do that, I'm going to work on doing that.
I guess my question would be, you said the $14 million surplus that was in there has been built into the next budget. What happened to that money? What'd they do with that money?
Spend it.
What'd you spend it on? You were here, I
Different
wasn't.
thing. Spend it on
What'd you
different
spend it
things.
on?
Spend it on different things.
It's in the
That
new
was one
budget.
That was one-time funds.
Let's pause for a second.
Uh-huh.
The $14 million is sitting in a capital reserve account from last year,
From
okay?
last year.
My proposal is to take that $14 million and give it to the school boards to build schools. Now, what I'm talking about is, instead of having a $211 million budget this year and having a $14 million surplus again this year in 2014, we raised our budget to $225 million, which means that all the stuff that was increases in this year's budget is what we are now spending that money on. So we are not going to spend it on capital improvements for the schools. We are going to spend it on operational expenses for the county government.
And of course, the question that we just asked is what operations would you discontinue to eliminate that expense? And we can certainly get into that at a later time. The one thing that you have said that I agree with is that that surplus money, yeah, I think we need to do that to address some of the needs of the schools, some of the roofs that are leaking, and whatever other maintenance requirements that might be there. So that's one point we can agree on. And but I just want to make one thing clear. You were talking about my numbers on the per capita expenditure that I was talking about. Our actual expenditure for 2014, based on the population numbers that I've got, is $703.51. The number adjusted for inflation, going back starting at 2003, would be $703.54. So we're talking about 3 cents per citizen. And I'm not quick on math, but I think the last time when I figured it, it was like $5,000. So that was the number I was talking about.
And we should look at our numbers.
Right.
I got my numbers from the budget itself, and my numbers show that in 2004, our population was 139,000. It is 183,000, which would make about a 44,000 person difference. If it was 44,000 instead of the 47,000 that you used, that inflation-adjusted number would be less than what your number is.
The population numbers that I've got came from the state of North Carolina, Office of Budget Management, I think.
Yeah.
And my 2004 number is 146,053 for 2004.
And what is it now?
For 2014, I think 2013 is the last year that had an exact number. It's 186,446. The number I have down for 2014 is 190,037, and I'm not sure, that obviously must be a projected number from them.
And our number in the budget that we used was 183,000. And so if we were 7,000 less residents, it would make that 3 cent difference that you were talking about an even greater difference.
Right. So there we go. There's another place where we can slice and dice the numbers and
Yeah.
all day long.
Even still, we're talking about 7 cents total, so 3
Right.
cents is half of that. It's 50%.
Hey, this proposal that you have, we only got right before the meeting started, so I didn't get it in advance, so it will be interesting discussion as we proceed to determine who gets cuts in operating, because $25 million will cut a budget by that amount, which means the mandatory services will not be cut, but the other ones will, so there are greater cuts in different places, and we've had these discussions previously whenever we go through a budget process, so I'm sure there'll be a lot more conversation on this in the future. Larry or Chris, do you have anything that you want to say at this time? I don't know if you had this in advance or not, so.
I just think it's something we probably should look at and just see if it's there. If it is, do something about it. If it's not, then, we can't change it.
Like I said, there'll be a lot more discussions on that one. Okay, we're going to come back to some budget stuff at the end then? Got a good idea? Okay. So let's go to the next tab for capital needs.
Okay, this is going to be, again, further progression in our discussion. We've got the school systems as well as the Community college are going to come in, they're going to talk to you, once again, with their most updated priority list of important projects, large projects, and then also smaller projects. The way we've set it up is they're going to make a 10-minute presentation each, and then we'll go to a little question and answer period for you guys, based on their presentations or based on any other information you've already got from previous meetings. And then once we've identified what their needs are and what that number is, then we do need to start talking about funding options, and one that Mr. Osterreich just presented and others would be debt, and how do we go about taking on an additional debt. So both options are there, but again, we'll bring them up, let them talk to us here, and then again afterwards, if you'll let them talk, do their 10-minute presentation, and then we'll do question and answers together, if that's okay with you guys. That way we can keep the process moving pretty quickly. Good? Okay, so Dr. Shepherd. Okay. Their information's in your book, so we put it in a hard copy so you can see it. Sometimes the screen's a little bit small when you do these large spreadsheets. So, page 49.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing Cabarrus County Schools to make our presentation to you here this evening, and we'll try to stick within that 10-minute guideline Downs has asked us to do. And I have on my right Ms. Kelly Klutz, our Chief Financial Officer. She'll be doing the financial part of our presentation, and Dr. Shepherd will be doing the bulk of our capital requests this afternoon. And just for whatever it's worth, you know, Mr. Osterreich, I was on the board here in 2000 when we started building schools. And the majority of that debt that you're talking about now, the $469 million, is for schools. And I just wonder where we would be today if we hadn't have built all the schools that we've built over the last 10, 12 years. And the kids just keep coming, and we have to find a seat for them. And that's one of the reasons, one of the big reasons that you'll see our deferred maintenance list is so huge, is because we were in the building school mode for so many years that we couldn't keep up with the maintenance. Therefore, it escalated, and it's where it is today, and it just keeps on escalating. And see, now we're getting back in that mode again, where the growth is coming, the growth is here, and we have to address that. And so with that being said, I'd like to ask Dr. Shepherd if you would continue with our portion.
Madam Chairman, thank you for inviting us to be here tonight. We're always grateful for everything that you do. I'll leave it alone, I promise. For us as a county commission, we're very thankful. We're thankful that you helped us through, I've been with you 6 years, and 5 of those 6 we were in what I think was called the Great Recession, and we always came to you with greater requests than you could provide. We've, in our budget request, we've always presented to you the fact that of all 115 school systems in the state of North Carolina collectively, between federal, state, and local funding, we're your 114th in the state. We know that you don't expect us to provide results for you at that low level. We don't. We provide you results that are much more productive than that, and very proud of that. The last couple of years in our operating, you talked a lot about operating expenses in the last little bit tonight. We've asked for more than you've been able to provide, and you've been very helpful in keeping us flat in most cases with operating expenses, and as a result, we have been able to keep our head above water. I know this tonight is not about operating expenses, but I just left a teachers meeting. I just left a representative from every classroom or every school in our district, and our teachers, their classrooms are growing. There are far fewer teacher assistants than there were a year ago. They're struggling to find money for supplies in the classroom, taking money out of their own pocket. They're seeing some things happen all around them that's quite disappointing to me, and then to come here tonight and to hear that we might have fewer dollars to operate our school system in the future is quite discouraging. So I say that to you, that we're appreciative of all we get, and we've been very polite in the past in thanking you for that, but please don't mistake our politeness for the fact that we are not in greater need than you've been able to provide in the past. And so I'll move now to our needs for construction. You see the list before you there tonight is a project list that we put together of items that we need that are lower than $200,000. We don't think when you're putting a bond package together that you would want to include these items, but yet we've got to find some way of providing these items for our schools. They're not in priority order. If you look on the left column, you'll see that they're in alphabetical order by school or by site. The list totals around $15 million, and so those are not wants. In most cases, they're needs, and so we want to make you aware of that list. I'm not going to review that with you item by item. There are some that probably are less of a need than others. And I joke with Kelly Klutz when we put something like this together, when we argue about something that maybe is not on that list, if it's $15 million, then maybe we drop the list down to $14 million, but it's still a very real need. So I'm not sure that we want to walk through this item by item, but we have some very real needs that are in the less than $200,000 category. I would like to call your attention, though, to the next list in front of you. And we're getting to that. That is our bond referendum projects list that our board has reviewed, and we have a construction committee that has reviewed all of the large needs of our school system. You can look in the bottom right-hand column and see that totals $101 million. Oftentimes we've been asked about which list are we referring to. That's because we have multiple lists. We have a list before you or before our board that we've reviewed in the past that totals $250 million in needs for our school system. We pared that down to a list of $101 million items, and our board has begun the process of prioritizing those projects. As you can see, the top 3 items there are items that our board has prioritized as their top 3 priorities. Items below that purple line in the middle there are items they're still giving consideration to, and so we'll talk with you about the top 3, and then we'll talk about with you where we are with the bottom half of that list. First, we are growing rapidly again. I'm very thankful for that growth, even in the midst of a year when a new charter school, and we won't go there tonight, but a new charter school opened and took approximately 600 students away from us. We still grew this year as a district. We have topped the 30,100 mark at this point. More students have been here are in our school system now than ever before. And in order to address the growth in our elementary schools, particularly in our northwest area, we're going to need to build a new elementary school, and to be quite honest with you, we don't need to wait much longer. We're hopefully narrowing a site selection for that particular school, and we'd like to move as quickly as you're willing to allow us to do so. And I appreciate saying that maybe we could get something done before 2016. That's good news for those schools that are overcrowded at this point. We also know that we have aging facilities. Just one of those at this point that we'd like to bring to your attention is Mount Pleasant Middle School. When I first arrived here 5-6 years ago, we were talking about then how to replace that school. Then, as I said, we hit the recession and was unable to do so. But Mount Pleasant Middle School is a serious concern for many reasons. And so I will gladly take any of you on a tour of that facility if you don't believe that's a need. We can go look, walk, and talk, and I think in the end when we leave we'll all be in agreement we need to do something about Mount Pleasant Middle School. We've heard lots of talk about some of our aging elementary schools as our third priority. Royal Oaks is one we mentioned quite often. You might want to, if you haven't visited that facility, you might want to go take a look at that. That school desperately needs to be replaced, in my opinion, but that's not the only school that we need. So we're going to have to look at district lines, and going to have to look at where students are in aging schools and make some hard decisions. I also, Coltrane Webb has some facilities as a part of that campus that need to be replaced, and Beverly Hills, we often talk about how that facility is in need of repair, replacement, and then R. Brown McAllister as well. So we have a number of aging elementary schools that we're going to need to build a new elementary school in order to replace that. Those 3 items alone total $71 million, and that is what we need today in new construction. If you look below that purple item, you'll see that there's a number of roofs that need to be replaced. That's not the total list of roofs. I don't know how many total that would be, but I would say, we talk about sometimes about putting things on replacement cycles. Those aren't things that we can afford to wait to place on a replacement cycle. Those need to be replaced today. Our facilities, you've heard lots of discussion in neighboring school systems and some discussion in ours about mold and what happened this summer with so much rain and as a result of all that and failing roofs. So that's something we need to give serious consideration to. The next item on the list is security vestibules. We found a good way of addressing some of the need or some of the concerns about safety in our district is by placing an extra set of doors just inside the school that would direct all traffic that comes into the school into the office once they're checked in the office, and they can go about business in the schools. We've done that in many of our schools. We have some more that we need to do that in, and immediately $1.5 million for finishing or taking the next steps in that list. The next item on the list and again, these are not in priority order for our board. They're still in discussion as to exactly how much and where, but we want to call them to your attention. Central Cabarrus High School. There's quite a bit of debate that's going on as to whether we need to invest more in that facility or whether we need at this time just to stop and say we need to build a new school for those. I know that the opinions vary on that. And at this point, I would bring to you the idea that we need to do some planning, and I know you've had discussion with Mr. Whitke about that in the past. We need to get a master plan developed for that site and then decide at that point if it's something that we need to replace as a whole or if it's something that we need to replace one building at a time. Just get a plan in place is what I would bring to you tonight to give consideration to. We have a couple of very successful programs on the campus of J.M. Freeze Magnet. Our PLC is there. We're going to have to find a new location for that. And then you can see the last item on that list, just basic pavement repairs and replacements, improvements that we need to make. So that is the short list, $101 million. As I said, the larger list is $243 million. And so I'll be quiet and see if you have any questions or how you want to handle this or if there's anything I left out from either side.
Commissioners, do anybody have any questions? I think most of this we've discussed a couple times.
Yes.
It's always good to remind us. Does anybody have any questions?
One
this time?
one question that I would have, let me make it perfectly clear up front that I am not an architect nor an educator. So I'm just curious as to these projected costs on the new schools. Is that, in your opinion, conservative, or you think it accurate? I'm not sure how you go about. It's got to be some estimating involved. Guessing.
Mr. Whitke's been with us for a couple of years, so I'm going to call him an educator. He's a trained architect, so I think maybe he can address both.
So he fits both of those descriptions.
Sure. Commissioner Morris, what we've done is taken the same basic school footprint that we've used in the past and use that as an example, simply to get a price together, a cost together for the work. And in the elementary schools, of course, we've done a number of them recently. So the last time was bid in 2009. The last group of 2 elementary schools were bid. And I will say that those were numbers that were very favorable to the owner. Mm-hmm. They were very low by literally projects that were bid 2 years before those were significantly higher. But because of where the economy was going at the time, the school district received very favorable bids. What we've done is taken those numbers and escalated them a percentage per year until out to where we believe we would be bidding these projects, and used those numbers. So we've included inflation as well as anyone can plan for it now, right, of a certain percentage per year, and then added in cost for site and site development work as well. So it's not I want to say it's a little bit like crystal ball gazing, because no one has a fixed idea on where the economy will go and how quickly cost will increase. I think I've mentioned in the past when I've spoken to this body that we are seeing prices for materials increase. Labor costs, not so much, but definitely material costs have been increasing. And I believe that will continue. And so I always caution people that when they see numbers on a page, you're really looking at sort of today's dollars. If these were to be extended out much further than the 2016 bid date, I think these would be questionable at that point. But these are prices that hopefully will hold until that date. When the bond would be implemented.
One of the comments that I hear from folks from time to time are, and when talking about building schools, they question, why do you want to build a new masterpiece each time? You should use the same plans over and over, which I think you've done in the past. And is that something that we're able to do here? I'm sure you'd learn some things that need to be changed, but basically similar facilities as what have been most recently constructed?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, we built actually 7 schools from one footprint or one design.
One design.
And it was either 6 or 7, but we certainly did use the idea of a prototypical plan and built it several times. You modify those, of course, for site conditions, but overall
Right.
it's the same school. And in doing that, there is economy, obviously, and I think we saw that certainly, again, in the last 2 schools that were built. Many of the same contractors that had built the earlier ones were bidding those. And, their experience came to play in terms of the construction of those new schools. We would continue to do that same sort of idea. However, because of the nature of how technology has impacted education today and the way children learn today is certainly different than it was even as recently as when those schools were initially designed back in the early 2000s. We certainly believe that the plan has to be tweaked and improved to reflect the new ideas in terms of education. And we'd want to revisit that floor planning idea of the school. But having said that, we would like to say that this school design for the new elementary schools will certainly be the prototype for schools to come in the future.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does this cost include the land?
Yes, it did, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chu, just to address your first comment, my number one priority is to build schools for you, to be honest with you. I want to give you all of our unassigned fund balance. I want to give to you to build schools. I recognize that we need to build schools. You haven't heard anybody else say that. I want to give you all of our unassigned fund balance, and I want to cut our operating expenses to give you more money to build your schools. That was what my plan was. And but in return for that, I'm going to ask you to do more with the money that we give you. And $31 million for a middle school for, how many students attend Mount Pleasant Middle School right now?
Let me address that question just real quickly. There's 670 students currently assigned to the Mount Pleasant Middle School. And it has on here that we want to replace that school with a 900-student school, which our board talked about that on Monday. And as Dr. Shepherd said in his remarks, those below the top 3 there are all still in discussion. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at a 10-year out, 675 projected, according to the study that we just got back from NC State. And so we obviously would scale that 900 back to probably 700 with room to do 100 addition at some point in the future. And then to address Mr. Burge's question about land, as you know, you've already appropriated $1.5 million for the initial school that we're talking about, the number 1 priority. But now on Mount Pleasant Middle, that I wouldn't think would include land simply because we've already got a site there that's very usable. And our board has hashed this out. Ms. Poole was a member of the board at that time. We hashed that out already on that particular school, and that community, along with, at that time, 4 of our board members elected to leave the school on the site. It just don't make sense to me to move a school out of the community that is the heart of the community and build a school on another site where you have to buy more land. But anyway, that's just my thoughts, and it's a board decision, and obviously it'll be your decision in the end. But the projected growth in the Mount Pleasant area is just not projected to be there over the next 10 years, and so it would be foolish to build a school to house more students than you're expecting. Okay?
Well, one of the problems that I have with borrowing the money to do this is you take a school that you have listed here at $31 million, and when we borrow the funds to do that, by the time we pay that back, it's $50 million. I'm not comfortable with spending $50 million on a school for 675 students. I think there's a better way that we can do it. The second thing about that is I went to the most recent school that we built, Winkler Middle School, and I just think that school was built to a luxury standard. I've told you that personally, so that's not news to you, that's my opinion. When you walk in there, you will see the nicest lights you'll see in Cabarrus County, and it's in a corridor that was built to have as much natural light as possible. And it doesn't make any sense. It's filled up with luxuries there that are not required for a middle school level. And I would very much like to give you every dollar that we have to build a school, but I'm going to ask that you do more with that dollar. And that will be the exchange for getting the money right away and go ahead and starting to build schools. And I think y'all are capable of doing it. And I want to give you a bit of confidence and some enthusiasm about that.
I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Osterwright, but, you know, we went to a school just recently for our North Carolina School Board Association District 6 meeting, and it was a middle school, matter of fact. It just opened, I would say, within the last 2 years, and it was equivalent, maybe as equivalent as our middle schools are. But now, the word that I've heard in the community over the years, even when I was running to be on the member of the school board, was you ought not to build Taj Mahals. Well, I've yet to see a Taj Mahal. I've yet to see one because, you know, we build a quality school that's energy efficient, very functional, with longevity in mind, low maintenance over the years, and those type things. And all of those things come with a price. I mean, I know we talk about the floors, we talk about the walls, and they talk about multicolored brick and all these different things, which in some cases are very insignificant amounts. But now my children are all out of school, and up until recently my grandson was in school. But I think that the children of Cabarrus County deserve the best that we can give them as parents and as grandparents. And I don't think that there should be any second stepping to that. I think we need to meet the needs of what it takes. When I got on the board in 2000, we had less than 15,000 students. Now we got over 30,000, according to Dr. Shepard. So just in 12 and a half, 13 years, we've doubled in our population. And you have to grow to meet that need. And paying cash would be wonderful if you could do that. But I don't see the county being able to fund schools at the rate that we're going to be needing them. According to the ORED study, we're going to raise somewhere 6,000 to 7,000 children in the next 10 years. And my question is, where are we going to seat these kids? When Dr. Winkler came, our previous superintendent, when he came here in 1996, maybe 95, 96, we had 150 mobile units on our campuses. Do you know how many we got today? After building all of these schools, $500 million worth of construction, we still got over 150 units. Am I right, Mr. Wiki?
Close to that, yes, sir.
So what I'm saying is the growth is coming. It's there. And, you know, you talk about building these prime-type properties. They're built to last. I mean, they're not like a charter school where it's a for-profit situation where that the owner starts the school, runs it for 4 or 5 years, and when the maintenance issues come on, sells it and moves on to somewhere else. For maybe a 25 or a 30-year building, we're building 60 to 75-year buildings. We're in some right now that's that old, that were not built to today's standards. And when you talk about today's building standards and all of the different requirements from Department of Public Instruction, say if you say, when you say build schools, well, as Mr. Wiki can vouch, you know, Department of Public Instruction in North Carolina, they tell us pretty much what we've got to go by, and it requires a lot of funding just to meet those needs. Am I right, Mr. Wiki?
Yes.
I mean, I hadn't been doing this just a couple of days. I mean, we've been doing this going on 13 years now, and I wish there was a better way. I honestly wish there was a better way. But we live in a great part of the state. We live in one of the wealthiest counties in the state, and our children should not suffer because we got someone or a group of people that don't want to do what needs to be done to meet that need. And that's just my opinion. And I can say it's boards between boards, but that's just my thoughts on it.
My only comment would be that I think the numbers show that $31 million for a school for 675 students is a Taj Mahal, and
Okay.
we could have, if the need is that great, we should stop spending $31 million on a school for 675 and start building schools that more resemble what our needs are, and then take the difference between what we were going to spend on the Taj Mahal and what we built on our functional building and use that to build another school. I don't want to take that money away from you. I want you to get 2 schools out of what you want to spend on 1.5 or 1.25. And I think that's a reasonable plan.
I wish I knew how to do that. Dr. Shepherd, do you have a comment?
Just, I think in the planning for Winkler and Cox Mill, I think the architect made some really wise choices. I think we probably need to not talk about what it looks like or what it feels like, but actually what the per square foot cost in putting a facility like that together. So I think we need to bring you some more information. But I want to share one point, that when you walked into that building and you said you experienced expensive lights, if you probably looked at the flooring of that same area. And as you're looking before us today, you see a nice carpeted floor, but what you saw was some wise planning on the part of our staff and our architects to not to take concrete and cut it back and make it look almost as if it's terrazzo. So when you walk in that school with expensive lighting, you're walking on a concrete floor, which we wouldn't have in our home. We wouldn't polish concrete. We would have carpet or hardwood. So I take exception to the word luxury. I think we've made some very wise decisions, and we made them look very pretty. And there's nothing wrong with making a school look pretty. So I'd like to bring back some square footage numbers to you, and then we'll compare them to how other school systems around us are building schools and make an educated decision rather than one that's based on feeling.
I was just going to say, too, the lighting, you pointed out, Commissioner, that we have daylighting in that space, and that's exactly right. I will say that the lights do turn on mostly for evening events, and that's what they're there for. During the day, we don't have those lights on, and we have plenty of light even by the natural lighting that comes through that space. So.
It's not about what you spend on the lights. I mean, that is a humongous facility. They have got 2 gyms there. They have got their own auditorium with a sound booth, these incredible acoustic panels on the ceiling, probably a 35-foot ceiling there. That's not efficient for heating and cooling, but that's the way it was built, and that's an architectural feature. When we look at how much we owe in roofs, $12 million, the bigger that we build these facilities, the more we spend on maintenance for roofs and boilers and on a month-to-month basis in terms of heating them and cooling them. And they're humongous. We do not combine. It's interesting that you mentioned that they're sustainable, except they're not versatile. Instead of having a cafeteria and an auditorium in one space so that you can use dual use, they have a separate cafeteria and a separate auditorium, and they have 2 gyms at that school. They have a tremendous amount at that school. The lighting was just a sort of thing that you notice right when you come in, but there are functional things that have added tremendously to the cost of building that school and maintaining that school.
I would just point out, and the debate can go on, but the reason for many of those facilities being there are for community use as well as other school uses. So it isn't just that school that has those facilities. It certainly does have them available to those students. But if you look at the county parks program and other community groups that use our facilities, they're used extensively. And I can tell you that in most high schools, most middle schools, they have events going on every evening, and they're not just for our students. So I think there's a lot of commitment by the county and the school board to make our facilities available to people. So.
Larry, do you have anything that you want to add at this time? Steve, do you have anything else? Okay. I would call on Chris, but I think he stepped out for a moment. So thank you all very much. You've been very patient with us because I don't know, we might be back on schedule now, but I think we're back on schedule. But thank you all. You have a number of people in the audience, and I'm sorry. I went to get a cup of coffee. Did you recognize all your board members when you first got here, or your staff members?
No, I didn't.
Would you do that,
Yes,
please?
I will.
So-
I've got in the
And if they'll
audience here,
stand,
I know Barry Shoemaker's
be
back
great.
here. Barry, if you'll stand, and I got Blake Kiger with me, and I got Carolyn Carpenter, Rob Walters here, and I think that's all that I got. Jeff, one of our other board members, he's traveling somewhere, so.
And you have a number of other staff members
Yes,
that
I
are here
do. I
with
have
you.
some other staff. I got David here and Jason and Robert Kirk back there. And that's it. I think that's it. And of course, Lynn Whitkey, you heard from him already. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to come, and it's big business, guys. That's what it is. It's big business, and it's our children, the most valuable asset we have in Cabarrus County.
We thank you all. You're all, of course, welcome to stay for the next couple presentations. I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is in not only increase dialogue between, for in this case, Cabarrus County Schools and the commissioners, but all of the entities involved, because we do have 3 school systems or school entities that we fund this way. So next up, Kannapolis City Schools, if you would like to join us, please. And if you would, you could do it now or towards the end, if you would introduce or recognize your other people that are here.
We'd actually,
It's nice
if you
of
don't
them all to
mind,
be here, so.
we'd like to do it at the beginning. I'm Pam Kane, Superintendent, Kannapolis City Schools. Will Crabtree, Facilities and Finance. Todd Adams, our Board Chair. Danita Rickard, Vice Chair. We also have with us Technology Director Brenda Combs and Chip Buckwell, our Assistant Superintendent. Did I forget anyone? And we kind of claim them. You guys kind of share them. We thank you for it, and that's our technology, Cabarrus Gov. That partnership's working really well, and it's something that you've asked us to do in efficiency of operations, and we're here to tell you that it's working well for us. So we thank you for that, and we do include them as Kannapolis City folks.
Thank you for having us here today.
I am starting my 4th year as superintendent in Kannapolis City, and I have to tell you that I came from West Virginia. I feel like I was at my dinner table talking facilities. I am, in fact, married to an architect, and for 10 years I approved the plans for schools to be built in a state. So it feels like this is always a challenging conversation, so I appreciate that. But let me say, too, that we are really pleased to have the opportunity, and thank you for, this is a new kind of thing for me, in the last 4 years, but to have the ability to come to a group who will have challenging dialogue, but being able to really come to the table in a retreat and let us tell you our needs. And many countries, instead of saying, "How are you?" they say, "How are your children?" How are your children? And we really believe that this is one of the keys to how our children are doing, is in fact the places they come to learn. And there's a direct correlation between the facilities and the student achievement. And that's very much researched. So we also have in one of our elementary schools a plan that we call a village meeting. And that happens every week, and we come together and we start saying what's really the needs. Well, this is kind of what we're getting ready to present to you. What you might call it a village meeting. It really was our leadership team coming together, our board coming together. They've had a retreat over what we're about to present to you, as well as working with Cabarrus government. And so this evening we're going to bring to you, and because it's your money and you are looking hard at it, as we all have to personally and professionally, I've asked Will Crabtree to, as efficiently as possible, because we appreciate the 10 minutes, but to walk through what we've outlined in terms of our needs, the short term and the long term that does include a bond. Lastly, we have a technology need, and we can really bring that succinctly, but some of you have asked that more in a more detailed plan because we do work with the county. We're prepared to talk about that in any way that you'd like, but we also want to be mindful of your 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask Mr. Crabtree.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I'd like to start off by thanking the commissioners for all of your support in the past. You have been a big supporter of Kannapolis City Schools, and we appreciate everything that you've provided for us. Well, I'm going to start off with the capital outlay less than $200,000. Here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. There's 2 items that I would like to point out to you here, and that's 2 and 3, the bus cameras and the relocate office at A.L. Brown High School. We consider those to be pretty high security items, so that's why they're 2 and 3. And of course, we moved 1 up to the generator replacement after we had the report from the fire marshal, and appreciate your all's funding of that. So. A lot of the other stuff on this page is technology, and then if you move on to the next page is technology, and as Dr. Kane said, we'll delve into that a little more At the end, we do have some driveways and bathrooms and such, and flooring at the end of that. The capital outlay more than $200,000. This is where I want to spend most of my time. With one being a new middle school, that's what I'm going to focus on. We do have some other ones there, repaved parking lots and some additions and such. But I will focus on the middle school. Move on to the projected enrollment for 13-17. I won't get bogged down in a lot of these numbers, but I did think it was important that we presented these to you so you'd have some basis as to why we're asking for a middle school. When you look at our projected numbers for, I looked at up into 2016-17 because that was the time frame that we were looking at for a new school. At 2013-14, and I'm also only looking at K-8 because, once again, thanks to the construction of the new STEM Academy at the high school, we think we're in pretty good shape at our high school level. So I did not include the high school enrollment there. But we're at 3,809 students, K through 8. In 2016-17, we're projected to have 4,163 students. I do want to point out that this year in K-8, we had 108 more students than we had last year in K-8. We have, going by our 10-day numbers, and I think that our first month numbers, when I officially get them, are even going to be higher than this, but we had 88 more students than the state projected us to have this year. So I think when we get to the end of the 2 months, we may even be looking at the 100 mark where we can actually request more funding from the state, but I don't know that for sure yet. But all that to say, we're growing. We have been growing for the last few years. If you start looking at our enrollment from a K perspective to a 1 to a 2, you know, that K and 1 are our two highest grade levels, and we expect that trend to continue. Move on to the next slide. And why build a new middle school? Building a new middle school would convert the existing middle school we have and the existing intermediate school into 2 4-6 schools. This plan would have a grade configuration of a K3, 4-6, and 7-8. Now, that differs from what we have now, because now we have a K4, a 5-6, and a 7-8. This would solve many of our issues that we have, the top of it being overcrowding at our elementary level, and it would provide for future growth at the K-8 level. And it also would provide for developmentally appropriate grade transitions. We have seen issues at our grade transition between 4th and 5th, and think that a 3rd to 4th transition would be much easier on our kids. And would provide better vertical alignment of the curriculum. So here again, I wanted to provide you with some information, and this first chart is enrollment capacity projections if a new middle school is not constructed. So if we just kept our same grade configuration, kept things as is, what would it look like in 2016-17? Well, at a K4 level, we would be 330 students over. And I looked at it two different ways. I looked at it at the actual projected numbers for 2016-17, but then I looked at a second way of the highest number. So I took the highest class sizes and put them in there. So the highest class sizes, of course, at that time frame would be K4, so it wouldn't change, it'd be 330. But at a 5-6 level at KIS, looking at the actual numbers, we would probably be okay there, right at the capacity. But if you look at the highest numbers, we would be 147 over. And then in 7-8, if you looked at the actual projected numbers, we would be well within capacity at 129. But if you looked at the highest number that we would have to accommodate at some point in the future, we'd be 147 over there also. Now I'll move on to the next slide, and this is the enrollment capacity projections if a new middle school is constructed. Because I'm sure one of the questions that would come up is, we've always said that we had overcrowding at the elementary schools. Why in the world are we building a middle school? So this is why. By building the middle school, we can change the grade configuration and we can clear up that overcrowding at the K3 level now. So if you look at the K3 level, under real projections of 2016-17, we would have 142 students to the positive, or capacity to the positive. Here again, that wouldn't change because the highest class sizes are at K3 also. Then at 4-6, we would have really big capacity at 4-4-6. But if you looked at our highest needs, highest enrollment numbers into the future, it would be only be 252. And then at KMS, and that's assuming building a school for an 1,100 capacity. And while we looked at building a school for 1,100 capacity, it's because when you look at future numbers, it looks like the enrollment of that school is going to be somewhere around 1,000 to 1,100. So that's why we picked that number to build. You would have a 53 student capacity surplus at that point. So facilities conclusions. Why would this be a good move for us? Moving the elementary model from a K4 to K3 would allow us to remove all of our mobile classrooms. And while we don't have as many as Cabarrus, we do have quite a few for a system our size. This would save approximately $75,000 a year that we're paying in lease payments. Building a new middle school would also allow us to construct spaces suitable for STEM and arts education, and would be able to better align our facilities that we currently have with what we see at A.L. Brown High School. The two intermediate schools would allow us to spread enrollment and have room for future growth without having to add on to the existing Kannapolis Middle School, which was part of a previous plan we had. One of our previous plans included adding 2 wing additions onto the middle school, but after we researched it and looked at this, we have determined that that would not be needed. And to keeping the 5 elementary schools instead of 6 removes the need for redistricting and preserves the community schools concept, which is something we've really tried to protect in Kannapolis, of having those community schools so the community, around each school can really identify with that building, and it feels like home for them. The next few slides delve more into what we're looking at as far as technology. I will talk through them fairly quickly and get to the last page, which is a summary. But A.L. Brown High School, what you see are the numbers, and for what we're looking at doing is for a 4-year replacement schedule, and we're assuming $1,000 per device. Those amounts are what we would need throughout each fiscal year to be able to do that. So it's a pretty high number at A.L. Brown. Kannapolis Intermediate School, same story. These are our numbers. This is what we would need by fiscal year for that. The middle school, Fred L. Wilson, Forest Park, Jackson Park, Woodrow Wilson, Shady Brook. Get to page 77 to look at a total. So this would be the total for the district. Assuming a 4-year replacement cycle at $1,000 a device, we're looking at $1.3 million a year over those fiscal years to be able to do that. And then if you turn the page to 78, these are our immediate technology needs for fiscal year 14. They total $334,400. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll ask if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Crabtree. I had talked to Ms. Kane earlier today, but you said, for the benefit of everybody else, that we have your middle school will house 1,100 students. Is that right?
Yes.
And your cost on that is $23,300,000.
That's what we have it estimated at right now. As Mr. Wiki said earlier, without bidding it, it's really hard to tell. It does fluctuate, but going off of historic data of how we've built schools in Kannapolis in the past, that's what we think we can build it for.
Yeah, that's a substantial difference between $31 million for 675 students.
Can't comment on other, just on Kannapolis. So.
Thank you very much for your consideration of the taxpayers.
Are you using metal buildings, or are you putting concrete and brick and mortar?
We have been using concrete, brick, and mortar. The last few buildings we built have been full CMU, concrete masonry.
Metal roofs?
Metal roofs. The STEM Academy, we did not use full CMU. We used sheetrock and metal studs for a lot of that. So it was a little different from what we had been in the past.
What's the warranty on most metal roofs?
40 years.
I would just say thank you for the way you've laid it out. Makes it easy to understand, and I appreciate that. Really like the realignment of the grades that I know because of your size is unique. You're able to do that, but that sounds like a real plus to me from my own experience with children. So thank you for being here today.
I'd like to comment on that, Steve. To those of you who have been in this for a while, we have talking about a new intermediate school. But after our staff studied all this from a facility standpoint and from a curricular standpoint, it seemed better to have two intermediate schools instead of turning our old intermediate school into an extra elementary. That was our plan if we built the intermediate school next to our middle. And I'd also like to remind you, those who weren't on the board at the time, when we built our existing middle school, it was planned as an intermediate school. And then we had the opportunity to partner with the county on athletic fields, and we were able to change that into a middle school, which was more profitable. However, in our current middle school, we don't have the STEM technology that we need. There were a lot of things left out of that building because it was already under construction when we made the change. So, and I'd like to comment on what Mr. Shue said. He's been in this business 13. I've got about 10 extra years on him. So I've been at this table many a time in the past. When I first came on our board in 1990, this county was so far behind in capital buildings for schools. The schools, and particularly in the county, because it was greater, larger population, of course. And that first bond that we had concentrated on trying to rid ourselves of poor buildings. I mean, leaking plumbing. If you could go back and look at the video that was made, you would be astounded. And because for years the county had not kept up with the school system, and the schools that we had were in disrepair, and couple that with the population that just started coming. I remember Ms. Carpenter going to Atlanta because we were comparing Cabarrus County to Gwinnett County and Atlanta, that all of a sudden there was this huge boom in population, and how did they handle it? And that's what started coming up 85 to us from Charlotte, was the growth. And so the reason we have so much debt in the county is because we've tried to play catch up. And if we don't keep abreast of what's going on, I'm afraid we're going to wind up the position we were in the 80s. In 1990, we built Jackson Park Elementary School for $50 a square foot. It's over 100, closer to 150. I asked Will to build now. We also had overhead projectors in 1990 and Rexograph machines. You know, you can look at this. This is just for 1 year, what technology we need. And so I think it's like comparing apples and oranges now. The schools we were building in 1990 are not the schools that we need to build now. And I respect what you're saying about the $12 million, but who are you going to get to finance the rest of it? It would take, we in Kannapolis, before I was on the board, there was very little capital money coming from the Cabarrus side, and the current board saved money from the Rowan side to build what was the first middle school. It's the existing KIS now. But they saved for years to be able to build one school. And at $12 million, that's half of what we're asking for one school, and you see how much more needs Cabarrus has. My husband always is a very big advocate of paying cash. The two things he said that we can go into debt for were housing and education. And that's what both of this is. It's education, housing.
Just to respond to your question, or your statement, if it was just $12 million, I would agree that it would be very difficult to fund these schools from a cash position. But we have about $30 or $35 million in unassigned funds at the moment that that I would like to give to the schools. And you put that with the $12 million, and we're almost halfway to the bond in really the first year. And to do that, and from a long-term perspective, if borrowing money for a $30 million school costs you $20 million, you are robbing Peter to pay Paul, because one day that could be $20 million to build a new school, if we could cut that debt service out. So I think there's a lot more possibility there than just 12 million.
Chris, do you want to, sorry, you were out, I mentioned to you briefly that when Cabarrus was finishing up, so I want to give you an opportunity, either Kannapolis or Cabarrus, if
Right.
there's anything that you want to say.
No, I would just like to thank both systems for being here, and thanks for what you do. I don't have any questions for Kannapolis City Schools. I just have one request from Cabarrus County Schools, and that would be a list of the schools and their capacity, and at what capacity numbers. I'm not sure if you have that readily available, but if I could have a copy of that, I'd appreciate that.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to add one thing. I noticed on this list of capital outlay less than $200,000, and you have on here relocate office at A.L. Brown High School, which you mentioned. Being a proud graduate of A.L. Brown High School, and also being a person that is very interested in preservation and adaptive reuse of buildings, I think it's appropriate to point out that that building was built in 1949, if I remember.
52.
52. It was in that ballpark, but compliments on how well maintained. Obviously, there's been a lot of money spent there since that time, but I think one of the most impressive school campuses in the state of North Carolina.
Thank you.
Also, to let you know about that, that is a result of all the crisis planning that we've been doing, and we had the SRO officers and our police office, and we really zeroed in on that this summer with crisis planning, and that is a result of that planning with our police to relocate that for security.
It would move the entrance from the center of the campus to the First Street side. So visitors would be entering off First Street instead of through the center of campus.
I'm glad you're not biased at all.
Doesn't bother us at all.
And where did
A
the
green
chairman
shirt
go?
like Will has on, I mean, really, you know. If there are no other questions, then thank you all very, very much. And you did get everybody introduced,
Yes.
staff members?
Yes, we did. You did.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
We did.
If you take the time out to drive all the way down here from Kannapolis, then we want to make sure you get recognized.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate all you do.
Thank you all. And the next we have is Rowan Cabarrus Community College. You have a number of folks here also, so. And we've got, so we should have enough seats up here for you guys, so if you all.
And I will start by introducing our people. I'm Carol Spalding, President of Rowan Cabarrus Community College, and we're very happy to be here. On my right is Janet Spriggs, our Chief Financial Officer, and on my left is Cindy Minot, who is our Vice Chair for Cabarrus County, and also Dakita Van Brink Johnson, who is on our Board of Trustees. I don't know if I should introduce Steve or not, but he also sits on our board, as you know, so we're thrilled to be here with 3 of our board members. We'll move on. You can see from the slide, and I think we're on page 80 of your booklet, that most of our facilities are in Cabarrus County. On the left is the one campus in Rowan County, and then we have multiple locations in Cabarrus County. In fact, we have 3 campuses here. The bottom right is the research campus, which is paid for and supported completely by state dollars, and there's no county money going there. So Cabarrus and Kannapolis have the enjoyment, I think, and we do as a flagship college of the community college system, of having that amazing building. So that is not anybody's county money, in case you haven't been there yet, but it is exceptional, just sort of over the top and state of the art. We've moved both of our nursing programs, one from North Campus and one from South Campus, to that location to be with the biotechnology labs and be able to maximize some of that. So at our recent fire drill, we had 325 students empty out onto the parking lot from that building, and so it's almost at capacity now. We're really proud of that. I wanted to go to the next slide, please. That is our impact in Rowan and Cabarrus service area. This is our 50th anniversary year, and we're both looking backwards and looking forwards. And so we've looked ahead to say that, currently we're serving about 21,000 students in the two-county area, about half here and about half in Rowan County, and about 97% of those students actually live here. Even our online students live here and take courses online. And so we really are very rooted in the community. And for over the past 50 years, we have served over 600,000 people in Rowan and Cabarrus counties. In fact, we have teachers who have, had as their students a daughter, a mother, and, now the next generation also in their classes. So it's really been a legacy and a good experience for us. And we also want to talk about the economic impact of the college, which you can see in the last statement, where the increased earnings of our students contributed an additional estimated $36 million in taxable income to North Carolina's economy each year. So we feel like we're a major contributor and a great investment in the community. In fact, we are the 7th largest employer in Rowan County, but we're way far down on the list for Cabarrus County. I want to make a point, because we know that other people might be listening to this program, is we want to remind people about how important higher education is, and we are the only public higher education institution in the two-county area. And if you look at the chart, you can see that your income these are on averages, but your income will increase with the more education that you have. And these are numbers that are corrected for Rowan and Cabarrus service area. They're not general North Carolina numbers, they are really specific to this area. And you can see the general averages there. And if you go to the next slide, you can see how the unemployment percentages vary by education, and so that you're more likely to be unemployed during hard times if you have less than a high school education, and less likely to be unemployed if you have a higher education degree. Even some college gives you more of an advantage when it comes time to layoffs. So these are things that make it we take our role and our mission very seriously, and that we're interested in jobs, and we're interested in helping people increase their capacity for earning a living and supporting their families in our area. I want to go to the next slide after this one. We'll come back to this one. This is our list. Number 8 fell off the bottom, but if you go to the next 2 pages, you'll see there is a number 8. These are in priority order. We can go back to the big list if you don't mind. Thank you. And so as we've been thinking about the past, we've also been thinking about the future, and we know that in the future we're going to need another building on our South Campus. We're sort of spread all over the county at the moment, and for us to be able to take additional students, we're going to need another building in the future. This particular term, we were up 3% in enrollment, and that is really good news, because the more students we serve, the more who will have these degrees and be able to earn livings and increase their income. So that is actually very different from what other community colleges are experiencing. After a recession, many people go back to work, and you see a fall in enrollment. We did a little bit after that meteoric rise in 2010, but we are now seeing a turn, and it's not the hardcore unemployed. It is really people who I think are getting the message that, gee, if the economy goes down again, I want to be in a better position to withstand it. I want to be able to get the next job or have the next certificate for a promotion. So we're seeing more students coming back to us. Our facilities are not just 8 to 3 or 8 to 5. We run our facilities full bore until late in the evening. So we use our classrooms very efficiently, and but we've also found that we need to prepare Cabarrus County residents for the jobs of the future. Our regular boxes of classrooms, even with technology in them, will not do that. And so we're looking at an advanced technology center which can be modified to fit the incoming businesses that are coming. We think that Advanced Technology Center will help us support advanced manufacturing, nanotechnology, some of these battery kinds of programs that are out there, and it can be modified to adjust to whatever company comes in. We have robots. We don't have a place to put them. So our robots are in a closet. They come out. we could do more. We can get equipment sometimes from the state, but we don't have a place to put some of these high-end programs. So we do know that we need additional capacity in the Cabarrus County area, and we think advanced technology would signal a couple of things. One is that Cabarrus County is ready for high-tech jobs, and that we can build the workforce of the future, and this will help us prepare to do that. So that's number one. Number two is an issue that several of us have talked about before, and that is relocating and upfitting our the programs that are located in 3 small storefronts at Cloverleaf Shopping Center. We'd like to pull them all together, or most of them together, and upfit those. This is a very vibrant program, very viable program that also has a great feed-in from the K through 12 system, where students can get a cosmetology degree or certificate while they're in high school. And this has great implications for the communities where it might end up. And so we've got a price tag there that is just, it's a multiplication of the number of square feet times the amount of money. And that's what all of these are. They're all estimates. And they're priced out on page 86 and 87. The next item on there is the additional exit for South Campus. And if we can go back to page 84, you can see our campus. This is on exit 55. We have 3 buildings there, and we are terrified of the interchange at I-85 and the Double Diamond. We have two or three exits that all go off on Trinity Church Road. And in talking with DOT about the implications for this intersection, this is like church being let out every hour on the hour all day long and half the night. And so this is going to be a challenge. And what they suggested is, don't you think you need an exit out the back for security reasons? Well, frankly, 3 years ago when we had these conversations, we weren't that worried about security things because nothing ever happened in community colleges. That is not true anymore. We've had several places do lockdowns that are in the community college system in North Carolina, and now we know we have to do the same sort of thing. We have security studies, we're well prepared, but we do not have an exit out the back. All of our exits go in the same place. And so what we're looking for is an exit out the back, which could possibly be a way of redeveloping that area and letting that land be used for other kinds of things. And so that's one of the requests that we have. The other one we have is additional land from South Campus. This is only a 23-acre space. We think that the community college in Cabarrus County can perform better and will need places for it to grow. At North Campus, we have 100 acres. And with 100 acres, you can pretty much span a really good period of time for growth. We wouldn't need that land to build on right now, but the price of that will not go down after that road's built. So that's why we put them together as a request. The other items is a renovations project, which is a compilation that's listed below, and also a vocational program upfit. We're already investing about $400,000 in the CBTC, and that's going to be a combination of our electronics and engineering programs. We're bringing a program from North Campus that doesn't have any space, combining it with one that's at the CBTC and sharing a lab and doing some renovation, and I think it's really going to create a synergy there. It's really going to be a good idea for the college and certainly for Cabarrus County. So I will stop at that point and see if anybody else wants to add anything from my group, but we're prepared to answer some questions or let you have dinner early, whichever you want.
Commissioners, anybody have some questions? I'll say that the Cloverleaf, we have talked primarily about the first 2 items, and the Cloverleaf campus, we're going to have to address. If you haven't been up there, I suggest that you go there. And we've talked about a couple different scenarios with them, but that's an item that I don't remember how many years you have left. You had to renew your lease. Is it 1, 2 years?
We renewed it for 2 years. We're now at we got about 20 months to pull it off.
Okay, so just to point that out, that's one that can't be delayed for too long because they have a lease situation, and they renewed it long enough to get us enough time to try to do something with it. So, it's a really good.
It's a really good program.
It's a really good program. I mean, you can't say much else about it, but other than that, it's a really good program, and it's not in a preferable location. And there are a couple kind of oddities about cosmetology and where you've said before you want to have it in a
Retail space.
retail, strip shopping center to have walk-up customers and everything else. So that would be my 2 cents worth on that one. I most definitely see that's a that fits the 9 through 14 scenario of high schools and community colleges working together, which I think is very important. And we're going to see more and more of that, I think, as we proceed based on how our economy is going. So, any commissioners, Chris, you?
Yeah, just following up with that. So if I understand correctly, the Cloverleaf, the cosmetology school where it's currently housed, you're wanting to upfit that or bring it out of the Cloverleaf and build?
Bring it out, probably
Okay.
not build, maybe lease.
Right, some space,
Yeah.
okay.
And we will bring some proposals, I think you were in that meeting, bring some proposals about how to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, we currently have that in your CIP for next year. Actually, we have it at 1.5. I'm not sure where the 3.3 came from. I think that's a new number, so.
Multiplication.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's how many square feet we're going to move it,
Right.
and where else we could put it.
But that does show up in your 2015 CIP.
The college
Okay.
also has $300,000 to put into it,
Right.
so I
Good.
think that's another
Great.
part of it.
Okay. Any other?
I agree with Chairman Poole, that is an important program, and I've been surprised at the people that I've talked to that fit that career path works extremely well for them. Even some folks that already have a 4-year degree have chosen to go that route. One thing I was curious about, the distribution of students on that, do you know how that breaks down? I know it's located in Cabarrus County, but do you have a lot of Rowan County folks that come down and participate in that as well?
We have an additional cosmetology program in Rowan County that's housed at a high school.
Okay.
It's not as successful as this one.
Okay, so they have the option,
That's, for the high school part, yes.
yeah,
For the adults would come to this one.
would come to this one.
To this
The other question that I had on the, and have been involved in some of these discussions over the years about the additional exit for South Campus, does that $1.7 million, does that include the land, the right-of-ways and so forth?
Yes,
And
it's,
does that kind of tie into number 4, the
Yes.
additional land? So that is the land that surrounds that road, or no?
Those are two different figures. If you look at, it's page 86, it says that the road is based on 3,000 linear feet, requiring a 50-foot right-of-way, so it's only the right-of-way, so it's purchased
Okay.
3.5 acres, and we're estimating about 100,000 an acre. The sooner we can purchase it, the less money it's going to be. Once that intersection comes to fruition, I think that land price might go up. We know that some of that land's trying to be sold for $180,000, and some of it's for $60,000, just depends on where it is. So the price of this is, it's a standard 2-lane road at $450 a linear foot. So that's how that came, and then you buy the acreage. The additional land is we're talking about 10 to 20 acres, which would give us another place for 1 or 2 more buildings. We need to think about either another long-term plan for a campus somewhere else in the county, years in advance, or adding some land here, which will make us able to serve the community for years ahead. I mean, I'll be long gone when you'll be building on these programs, on these acres, but we need to think ahead. If you have about 100 acres, you're good for a while. I think the University of North Carolina at Charlotte has 1,000 acres. They set that aside, and they are going to be good forever. But I think we ought to think ahead. That exit 55 is a great location, and I think the community college is going to be here. It's been here 50 years. It'll be here another 50, and it will continue to grow. So we need to plan ahead and make sure that we can afford the land and the property and the buildings that are going to need to be on it for people for generations to come.
Well, I think, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that anybody that has experienced, as you said, church letting out every hour on the hour, it is that way. And when you look at the plans for that intersection there, it is going to be extremely challenging, and the other routes of exit are narrow, two-lane, curvy, hilly roads. So I see that as a potential big issue, but thank you very much.
You know, another thing about the land for that is not only is it less expensive now, but if it's acquired by someone else for other purposes, it will never be available to us again. So.
And I do believe that there's some of this land that is some parcel or partial pieces that are landlocked. So sometimes that gives more motivation, to the buyer.
Yeah, and then once the road goes in, the
It's
private.
not landlocked anymore.
Right.
Right.
So we put it as sort of right close to each other. Maybe the land comes first and then the road is later, but with the security issues the way they are now, we really need to be thinking about an alternate exit.
And if I remember correctly, Carol, whenever this exit is completed, there will be no right-hand turns. Am I correct?
No left-hand
No
turns.
left-hand turns,
Yeah.
okay. I knew it was one or the other,
Yeah.
so.
You come right and then you stop and then-
It really becomes a bottleneck with that issue.
So this would help a lot. You wouldn't have to do the U-turn. You'd be able to get out of the light, turn left, and get onto 85 without making a U-turn and all of that. That'd be better.
Any other questions, comments?
Mary, anything?
Thank you so much for your time.
Jason, do you have anything?
Thank you.
Oh, that's the end of the presentations, I guess, from the staff's perspective, and I'm sure from the staff and boards of the schools. You guys, as far as commissioners, we've got some tough decisions to make here coming up pretty soon. How do we know the needs now? We've known them for a while, so how do we look at funding them? Again, there's two options. One is cash and one is additional debt. Your mission or your vision all along has been to move more to cash, and we've done that. That's thus the larger fund balance. But if we're going to go with debt, Commissioner Osterreich wasn't on the board at the time, but the rest of you decided if we were going to go issue debt anymore, that it was going to be a public referendum. So if we do that, there's going to be there's some schedules that you're going to have to adhere to just to get them in on time, to get the process moving forward and to be done in the appropriate time so that it can get on the ballot that you want it to go on to. So we're going to need to meet pretty quickly. Our board will need to meet pretty quickly to start discussing these different options and consider Mr. Osterreich's suggestion and others that the staff have and others that you may have as well individually. So we're going to need to move forward with that pretty quickly so that we can pull the schools back in and discuss those options and time schedules fairly soon. I did include in your packet, but also if you guys will go through your packet, there is a process there from how to run a bond campaign and that kind of stuff. So it's in there, it's in your package. So we pulled it off the website from the Division of Public Education, I believe it is. So it's not written in stone, it's all mandated, but it's suggestions. How do you do it? How do you form the committees? Who do you do? How do you educate the public? And all the way down. So we've got a lot. If that's the direction this board's going to go, no matter what it is, if it's a hybrid of debt and cash, if it's all cash, or if it's any way it goes, if it's got debt in it, we need to move pretty quickly so that we can let the schools know how to go about proceeding. So we need to get together pretty quickly, make some decisions on our side so that they can start making some decisions as well. Not only if we go debt, then we're going to need to talk about how much. Again, the 5-year plan, what we did was kept the tax rate. Again, remember the 5-year plan, and we're going to, come on up, Ben, because we're going to talk more about finance here in a second. But the 5-year plan is a planning tool. Anything past the current year is planning. It's just purely projections. And our mandate from you as a board for the last couple of years is to maintain the current level of spending or thereabout the current tax rate. So we did. And that's how we projected it out, and that's why the numbers are there, and that's why in 2017, fiscal 2017, we showed that there was going to be a surplus and that we could absorb a certain amount of debt service. So that's why it's there. It's purely a projection, an educated projection there, just based on the criteria that we know when we were presenting the budget last year. So every year, growth, whether it's less growth, more growth than what we used as factors, that's going to change it every year. So the next year, 2015 fiscal year, is going to be the number, the main focus, and then those next 4 years may look totally different than they do on the current years, just simply because of factors going on in the economy and in the county, or decisions that you guys make as a board on how we fund these and how we budget in the future. So I just want to give you that. We will need to meet pretty quickly, and that'll be sort of we can present it to you or discuss these in regular meetings as regular agenda items, or we can just call a special meeting and do a sort of a parking lot type issue meeting and just talk budget and look at every option we have. I know it's early we actually start our budget process next month when we start looking at capital improvement or our capital budget for next month, and in December we pass out the packets for the operating budget. So we're right there. So we need to have some direction, but again, if we're going to assume some debt, the committee or whoever that is that's going to be pushing these referendums forward, they're going to need a lot of time to organize and to make that happen too. So any questions on that? We're not looking for any direction tonight. I said there's definitely got to be some more meetings to explore the different options, and maybe it comes out as a hybrid of several options. So we'll see. But I think it's definitely something we need to look at. Is there any final questions for any of the different school systems right now? I think they gave you guys some really good information, and us too as a staff. We even got some new stuff that we hadn't seen before, so that's good. So with that, I guess we thank you for coming in and talking and answering the questions from the board and helping them understand more what your actual needs are. So we will be in touch with you very soon after we set our next meeting and we get a little bit better idea of how we're going to proceed, or our board's going to proceed. Then we'll be able to advise you, and then we'll move on from there. So we're gonna, if it's okay with you as a board, we've got about 20 minutes before dinner. We'll go back and finish the budget part that Ann and Pam were going to present, and we'll just talk more about that, and we'll get into that concept of the 5-year plan. And then we'll break for dinner, and then the folks from the Chamber and Economic Development will be here to talk a little bit about that as well. So, yeah,
okay. Well, I want to say that time being of the essence, we need to have this start discussion at our work session for next month and make sure that's an agenda item and that we have some time, a good amount of time to start getting into it. I mean, Steve's going to be gone for a little while, so I don't want to do anything with him not here, so if we can start it then, and we'll figure out, commissioners, with our work session in November, if you'll think about the idea of having a special meeting and be prepared at the work session with your November calendars. We all get really busy. We all have lots of other meetings. I made a joke earlier, a couple of you heard that there's a meeting tonight, and I got the notification about 1:50 today that there was a meeting tonight, and obviously I'm not going to that one. So, but we all have different meetings that we go to all month long, and if we can come at the work session with our calendars with a good idea of when we could schedule another meeting to specifically look at budget and these projects and come up with ideas on how we want to tackle it. I think that would be helpful to staff and most definitely helpful to everybody sitting on that side of the room. So anyway, then we're going to go back to budget then.
Yep.
Thank you.
What page are you on?
It's on page 27.
Excuse me. You guys can stick around if you want, or feel free to stand up and head out if you would like to. So.
it's on page 27, but it's also, because we're trying to consolidate, the whole page is on page 42 of your book. So you may want to look at that. It's got the whole shooting match on page 42. And what you'll notice is that the year 2014, this year, is highlighted because that's the only one that's approved. This is a plan. Both the GFOA, the government finance officers, the ratings agencies, the LGC, they all encourage counties to plan ahead and to plan strategically and to not just think about the one budget year, but what's going on in the future. So we do 5-year planning, and the first year we start with is the year we are truly budgeting, and that is an approved budget. Everything past that is there for planning, just so we can see how things lay out, because so many things you do currently affect you in future years. Now, you'll notice in that the 70-cent tax rate is steady throughout that. At the time we did this, our instructions were live within your current tax rate, so that's what it is. You'll notice that in years 16 through 18, we have surpluses. One year it's $710,000, then after revaluation it's $4.7 million, and in 18 it's $9.5. As Mr. Downs pointed out earlier, the further out you get, the harder it is to estimate, but the closer in, much easier. But we do have surpluses, even with the bond amount there. Now, another thing I want you to notice is on the top part on the revenues, under the one-time revenues, you'll see there's something called COPS proceeds, school debt / housing unit of $2,681,000. And you see that this year, then you don't see it anymore because that was a one-time fund and it's gone. Also, on the lottery proceeds, we had built up lottery proceeds and planned to spend them certain ways, and the ending of that buildup is in fiscal 14. So you'll notice it goes from almost $5 million down to 2.2. So the loss there from just those two sources alone is 5.3 million. So I wanted to point that out. Let's see. Notice in fiscal 15, at the point in time we did this, we budgeted almost $1.2 million in fund balance. That year was a very tight year. We were coming off losing that 5.3 I told you about, and yet the property tax and the sales tax hadn't had time for the growth that made 16, 17, and 18 so much easier. So for that year, we had in the plan $1.2 million in fund balance. Now, if sales tax comes in higher than we have projected here, then hopefully we wouldn't need to go there. But at the time we did this, that was what we were thinking. You'll notice that we did project about $450,000 in sales tax growing each year. We used 1.5% a year on the sales tax, and it may go better than that. We certainly hope it does, but that was the percentage that we used in this analysis. Also, on the property tax, what we were using in terms of growth was in fiscal 15, 1.5%, and then in 16, 2%. In 17, you'll notice that 6.7 million. That was a 6% growth rate on top of the 2% growth rate. So basically what's that's saying is that we'd be growing at 2% a year, but then when we do the reval, there'll be a 6% on top of the 2%. And that was the estimates the assessor was comfortable with at that time. Also, if you'll notice, 2017, that's our reval year, and so we do have an estimated 6.7% increase resulting from the reval. Now, also in 2017, you'll notice on the expense side under debt, $8,433,430. That was, at the time we did this, I talked to our financial advisors and got them to run us the numbers on what the debt would cost on $100 million in bonds, because we knew that we did have a lot of needs that we would probably need to address. And so that was the number he gave me at that time. I've talked to him recently and said, well, what would it be at the current rates? At the current rates, it would be $8,578,000. So they've gone up some, but not tremendously. If they go up to current rates plus 1.5%, that would put us at a rate of 4.865, and that would be $9,257,000. So basically, the range, depending on what rates do, went as much as increasing to cost $823,000 a year. So, where the interest rates does, I don't know. Most say that they will go up, but slowly. The Fed is trying hard to keep them down, but they're doing it artificially now. And once unemployment gets to the rate they want, then they're going to let rates rise. And rates have risen over 100 basis points since we financed. We got in perfectly. When we did ours for May 15th, it was perfect. And then the week after that, it went up, and it went up over 100 basis points over the summer. So it did go up. I also ran numbers on $12 million. If the RCC was $12 million, the debt service on that's about $1.1 million. So even with the $8,433,000, or if it were the $9,257,000, we would show a surplus in fiscal 17, given these assumptions.
Just to add that, there is some text that sort of defines the different categories. It's in your budget ordinance, but we went ahead and put it in here as well for your easy access as well.
Yeah, I added it to the packet, everything that's in the budget document that we send to GSOA and that we work from, to this packet. And I know there's a lot of questions. I had a real hard time when I first saw this trying to figure out how the schedule itself works. But on the expenditures, you'll notice for this fiscal year, we start with the $200 million. And what that is it takes the current year and pulls out any one time, and then we start adding in. So it shows you how we got from the $200 million to the $209, and then the one time to come up to the $213 in total. I find this to be a real helpful tool. And it does show, as you said, that our I think it got cut off this one, but our debt is 20.26% of our budget, and that is a correct number. Let's see, anything else? The number for the capital improvement this year of the $4,203,000, that's elevated because it includes the one-time funds that Ms. Poole was talking about earlier from the DMV. We chose to use that for one-time projects, and like $1.5 million of that's school property and stuff. So that's why it's $4.2 million that year, and then goes back to the 1,220 in other years. Any other questions? In fiscal 15, there's not a whole lot of additions. The two additions there relate to the library and the EMS substation. And those numbers are in under personnel, and then some also under the operating. Any other questions? I think Pam's going to go over the program matrix.
Just briefly to mention, all the commissioners received an email with this information in it, and basically what it is a tool for you to go back and look through the matrix. And what's up on the screen is just a summary rolling those numbers together so you can see them all on one screen. But there's a detailed matrix back in there on how you can look through all the programs that are funded by Cabarrus County, showing what the FY 2004 adopted tax rate is to those particular programs. And then if you wanted to make adjustments, like Mr. Oestreich was mentioning, to reduce the tax rate from 70 to 63 cents, you can go and get the tax rate equivalent in 2014 to come up with 7 cents by pulling programs and looking at the column where it says the FY 14 adopted tax rate. Because if there's revenues associated with those programs, there's no reduction as far as property tax is concerned. You need to have the property tax rate equivalent to what's supporting those individual programs. And like Ann's mentioned, if we have any additional questions or if anybody wants to sit down and go through some of these things and how they affect the overall budget, we'd be glad to sit down with you. But a lot of this information is in there as a tool for you to utilize to make some of those changes
if you so wished. And I mentioned too, back on the capital section where all the schools' presentations were, there is a section of information, 2 or 3 pages long, that talk about what general statute requires for us to do capital outlay for the schools and for the community colleges. And then if you were to actually go into a GO bond situation, what the school's responsibilities are versus what the commissioner's responsibilities are. And then a calendar that if we truly went through with this and put it on the November ballot, what the timetable would be starting roughly in May to accomplish that goal. So all those reference materials are in there for your review to look over, so you have an idea of what the whole process was. We were trying to provide you as much information as possible. So give you a little homework outside of the meeting, so.
So whichever method, whichever process you and the board decide, we want to make sure you want those schedules and that kind of thing. So that's pretty much a quick and dirty look at the budget, giving you our update on the first quarter. We're tracking well. So with that, we can answer any questions you may have just based on what we're telling you now. Or we can take a break. Dinner's on the way up right now, if you want to do that. And
Just in time.
perfect timing. It's okay. Are you okay
Just in time.
to go ahead and break now? Well, let's go ahead and break now. Relax a little bit. Maybe use the restroom, and by that time, it'll be ready for us to start eating.